Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock now. We'll get started. So um, we're on week 4 right now, and today we are going to do the labs. Yeah, and I know you guys are in the middle of midterms right now, so I think I can live with just giving you 2 labs instead of 3. Does that sound okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because I looked at the labs and I found 2 that I liked. But before we get into this, so I take it all of you have already done the sections already. Was there any problems in any of the sections that anyone had trouble with? We can look at that first before we look at the labs. If there isn't, we can just move on. Okay. So I unlocked 2 labs for you guys. One is count characters, and the other one is password modifier. Let's do count characters first. Okay, so this is lab 4.12, count characters. So write a program whose input is a character and a string, and whose output indicates the number of times the character appears in the string. The output should be the input character and the plural form, and as if the number of times the character appears is not exactly 1. So if the input is this, N Monday, it will count how many times the character N occurs in the string Monday. And as you can see, it appears only 1 time, right? So the output will be 1N. And if the input is Z, so Z is our character and the string is today is Monday, the output will be, because there's no Z's in here, the output will be 0 Z's with a comma and an S after it, because we put that if it's not equal to 1, right? And then if the input is N, and that's our character, and the string is it's a sunny day, the output would be 2 N's like that. I think we get the picture, right? So the reason I like this lab is because it's going to use a for loop, and it's also going to make use of the string library that we learned in this section, right? So just to get the ball rolling, let's write a couple of variables, okay? So I think the first variable is going to be the character that we're going to look for, right? So I'm going to say car. What do we want to call this character?
N?
N?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're going to need a variable to hold the string. So I think I'm going to call this, let me zoom in to make it a little more visible to you. I'm going to need a string, right? What do I want to call this string? Just input string? Does that sound okay? Yeah? Okay. String input. Like that, see? And then the very next thing I'm going to do, I'm also going to need an int variable that starts at 0 and increments every time we see the character N in input string, right? So I'm going to have an int variable. What am I going to call it? I think I'm going to call it count. I think that sounds fine, right? Count equals 0. And then we're going to increment it every time we see the character again, right? So we have our variables right now. So how are we going to pass these variables in? You can see that it's every input is going to be the character, followed by a space, followed by the entire string. Now, the way we accept this data is important because if you can see here, we see in the second example, we see the character followed by a space, followed by this string here, but this string has blank spaces between. So in order for us to get the data, we can just use a cin for the character. But in order to get this as a string, because it has spaces between, we're going to need to use the getLine function, which is part of the string library, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So very first thing, we're going to say cin, and then our character n, right? And that should be fine. But the very next thing we have to do is use the getLine function for input string, right? Now, you might have seen the getLine function in the previous sections if you've already done them, but it looks like this. We say getLine, and then we say cin, comma, and then we say the variable we want to pass the data to. In this case, it's going to be input string, like that. So by doing this, the first, when we see in n, it's going to be the very first character, and then it'll be stopped by a space. But everything after that is going to be passed into input string, even if it has blank spaces between. Okay. So far, so good. So what do we do now? We're going to need to use a for loop that iterates through every character of the string. And then using the .at function, we will check each character to see if it's equal to our character n. Okay. Does anybody want to tell me what that might look like? I take it you guys are all tired today, huh? That's okay. I'll just get the ball rolling. So, yeah, it's okay. I understand. Slam and Toki suggests we use a while loop, right? Now that could work, but I think we can get by just using a for loop. What do you guys think?
Either or.
Yeah, either or. Well, I'm just gonna, yeah. Oh, Jose Garcia asks, what does a for loop do again? So a for loop iterates a certain number of times, right? So I'm gonna use the keyword for, and then I'm going to need 3 statements in here. And then every time, okay, the first statement is going to be our initial statement, which is typically int I equals 0, like that. The second statement is our continuing condition. So as long as the middle statement is true, this for loop will continue to iterate, right? In this case, we want it to iterate a number of times equal to the length of the string. So how do I get the length of the string? was a function you saw before that gives you the length of a string and returns it as an int. Do you guys remember what that function was? It's the dot size function, right? So I'm going to say input string. I can spell input, right? Okay, actually, we have to say I is less than input string dot size, open close parentheses, like that. Okay, and then the last condition here is going to be the it's going to be I++, as Jose Garcia says in the chat. So I++. This is a line of code that occurs every time an iteration occurs. So let's think about our. Oh, Flamin' Toki says, I'm sorry, can you explain size again? Okay, so the dot size function returns the length of the string as an integer value. So for instance, if input string was equal to Monday, input string dot size would be equal to 6 because Monday has 6 characters. Does that make sense, Mr. Toki? If input string was equal to today is Monday, input string dot size would turn into 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15, because there's 15 characters in the string today is Monday, and that's including the blank spaces. Okay. So if input string was Monday, the code that's in these brackets would repeat 6 times because Monday has 6 characters. Okay. If input string was today is Monday, which has 15 characters, any code that we put inside of these brackets would iterate 15 times. So imagine the code in these brackets repeating that many number of times. Okay. Okay. So this is good progress. I have a starting index and I'm iterating a certain number of times, right? With each iteration, what I need to do is check if each character is equal to the same as n. And if it is, I'm going to increment my count by 1. Okay? So what, can anyone help me out here and tell me what kind of code I'm going to put inside this for loop? It's actually quite easy.
So you could put an if statement to see if the user string at the input string at I is equal to the character n.
If input string dot at I, because I is my index, right?
Yes.
Equals n. And that's what you're trying to say, right?
Yes.
Yes, I agree. So if this is true, we will increment our count by 1, right? So I'll say count plus plus plus, like that. Okay. So by doing this, let's say our input string was Monday again, right? And our n was n. What would happen is that before this for loop iterates, it says I equals 0, right? So it checks this line of code. So input string dot at I. At this point in time, I is equal to 0. So it's checking the character at the 0th index. For Monday, it's going to be capital M. And it's going to check if capital M is going to be equal to n. And it's because it's not, this code will be ignored and it will iterate again. Because the for loop reached the end of its code, what would happen is that I gets incremented by 1. So I is not equal to 0 anymore. I becomes equal to 1. Okay? Now we act this code, but this time I is equal to 1, right? So if input string.@I, the character on Monday at the first index is going to be O, the lowercase o, right? Because O is not equal to n, this will value to be false, which means that this code is ignored. And then we'll iterate again. This time I will be equal to 2. Now, the character at the second index of Monday is going to be n. Because n is equal to n, we will increment count by 1. So in the first 2 iterations, we didn't increment count. In the third iteration, we will increment count. Okay? And I'll continue doing that until we reach the end of the string, right? Okay, so we're almost done here. What's our very last thing that we got to do? We have to format our output in a particular way. We have to say the count with a space between, and then if our count is equal to 1, we will just output n. But if our count is not equal to 1, we will put output n followed by comma s. So it seems to me like we're going to need 2 if statements here, right? Wait, 2 if statements? No, 1 if statement, because it's going to check if it's equal to 1. Okay? So what am I going to write here? So, well, the first part's very easy. We just say the character followed by a space. So we're going to say cout n followed by a space, like that. But this next part is where our if statement comes in. So if, and what's our statement again? If I is equal to 1. Okay, I'm going to do it the way Jose Garcia says in the chat, if count does not equal 1. If count does not equal 1. If count does not equal 1, then what? Oh, forgive me. I made a mistake here. This actually shouldn't be n. This should be count. So if count does not equal 1, what am I going to output? I'm going to output what my n character is. And then no comma s, right? Cout n, right? But what if count is not equal to 1? Or what if it is equal to 1? Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. I got that backwards. We are going to put a comma s like this. But what if it is equal to 1? What kind of code am I going to have if it is equal to 1? It would be the same as this without the comma s, right? Because if there was just one n, we would just say 1 n, right? So I'm going to say cout n. Now, I feel like I'm forgetting something. It needs us to end each lab with an end line, right? Yeah, I think it does. So I guess I'll just put end line there and end line there.
You could have just put the endl after the if branches, right?
Yeah, I guess I could. We'll do it your way.
Okay.
Cout end line. Now, because this is outside of the if branches, this line of code would execute regardless of this if statement, right? So I think we're good. So how many of you are confident that this will work? Use a, okay. You're confident this will work? Okay. Okay, great. Let's actually try it. Okay, so n Monday, because Monday has only one n, it'll output one n. All right. Z, today is Monday. Because today is Monday doesn't have any z's in it, it would output 0 z's. And would put comma s because the count is not equal to 1, right? And then it's Sunday. It's a sunny day. There's 2 n's in that string, so we output 2 n's. And then t, this is a sentence with many t's, outputs 4 t's, right? Okay. So this was quite an easy lab. Go ahead and take a screenshot or do what you need to in order to get this. Of course, I will put this video up on Blackboard later. But with that, are we ready to move on to the next lab? Okay. Okay. So the next lab is going to be 4.13 Password Modifier. Now, the reason I chose this lab because it looks like a fun lab. So this is a simple encryption method, okay? So many user-created passwords are simple and easy to guess. Write a program that takes a simple password and makes it stronger by replacing characters using the key below, and then appending exclamation points at the end of the password, right? So we're going to have a starting password, and we're going to have an ending password. Every time we see a lowercase I, we will change it to 1. Every time we see an A, we will change it to the @ symbol. Every time we see M, we'll change it to an uppercase M. We will change uppercase B's to 8s and lowercase s's to $signs. And then lastly, we will add the exclamation point at the end, okay? So this is going to be really, really simple. It's also going to make use of the append function to put the exclamation point. We're going to use the @ function to change characters. We're also going to, so we use append, we use @. It's also going to require a for loop so that we can iterate through every character in the string. Okay. So let's start with declaring our variables. It seems to me we're only going to need one variable, right? It's going to be our password. Well, our starting password, right? So I'm going to say string. And then what do we want to call this variable? You just want to call it password? Okay. And then what's the very next thing to do? We need the user to be able to see in what the password is, right? So I'm going to say cin password. Oh, you know what? Something just occurred to me. I actually can't use cin. Well, what do I need to use instead?
Getline?
Getline, exactly.
Why do you have to use getline though?
Because getline gets the entire line along with blank spaces. If we use cin, it would get everything up until the first blank space it sees.
Can you have white space in the password?
I think so, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Okay, so we're gonna use get line cin, and then the variable that we need to pass it into, which in this case is gonna be password, right? Okay. So now what? After we get our password, we're gonna need a for loop, right? That iterates through every character of the string. Now, this for loop is going to be the same format as the for loop that we wrote in the previous lab. So someone help me out here. I'm going to say for what? Int I equals 0. That's right. And then the very next thing, I less than password dot size, right? Like that. And then lastly, what's the last condition that I need to put? I plus plus, right? Thank you, Jose Garcia. So now that we got this, inside the for loop, we're going to have a long list of if else's, right? So we're going to say if
Did you also use a switch for this?
switch.
Yeah, a switch.
Is switch one of the functions that you learned in the sections?
Yes. Yeah, since the arguments of a switch are either an integer or a character, I feel like it might be useful here.
Oh, well, I'll be honest with you guys. I've never used the switch function before. I was thinking of just saying password dot if password dot at I equals I, password dot at I equals 1. I was thinking of doing that. But we can do it your way. I just need to teach myself what the switch function looks like.
Yeah, let's challenge ourselves a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Switch statement. Well, a switch statement is not the same as the switch function, is it? No, they're two different things. Now, switch statement is not the same. Hold on. If I leave this, all the code that I wrote is going to go away. Does anyone Can anyone on their screen go to the section where you learn the switch function? And then we can share. You can share your screen. Because I can't leave this screen. I'll lose all the code that I wrote. Can anyone go to that section? Because I don't know which one it is. If I look up switch function on Google, it'll just give me switch statement, and that's not the same thing.
I have it.
You have it? Okay, great. I'll stop my share for a second, and let me give you permission. All right, go ahead and share your screen. Let's learn this together.
Here.
Oh,
I mean,
so switch statement is the same thing.
yeah, this is general. Yeah, also, you don't need break after default.
Well, actually, the reason why you, oh yeah, you don't need break at the default. That's just nice to be consistent.
Yeah.
But the reason why we have breaks is because multiple conditions can be true.
Yeah.
But we only want one, not multiple. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, we could use a switch statement if we could say switch password dot at I to be our switch statement, and then we're gonna have multiple cases, right? Case 0, the first case is going to be if it's equal to 1, and then it'll change it in the same way. We'll say change it to, if it's I, we're going to change it to 1, right? Okay. Let me take a quick, could you scroll back up just for a brief moment? Let me copy this. Okay. All right, you can go ahead and stop your share now. We can go back to the lab. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So we're gonna access this switch statement a number of times equal to the size of the password, right? So if the password was like 10 characters, this for loop would iterate 10 times. We access the switch statement 10 times, right? So it looks like we're going to say switch. Right? Now, the variable that we put inside is the thing that we're going to check if it's equal to the cases, right? In this situation, it would be password.atI. Like that. And then we're going to have some brackets here. Okay. So what's the very first condition? If it's I, we change it to 1, right?
Yeah.
So case, we're going to say case 1. So this will check if password.atI is equal to 1, right? And if it is, it'll do the code that we put in here. So in this case, we need to change the character at I and set it equal to 1. The character 1, right? Now, this is very important. Make note of this. Do you notice that I use single quotes around the 1? This is because password.at always returns a character. So I need to set a character equal to a character. And the way I indicate that it's a character is with single quotes. If I put double quotes instead, it'll interpret the one as a string, and that'll cause an error because I'm setting a character equal to a string, and that'll cause an error. Okay. All right. So now that I got this, I also need to say break. Now, the break function, it's used for a lot of things, not just switch statements, but what it does is it allows us to exit whatever exception handle that we're currently in. It allows us to exit for loops prematurely. It allows us to exit if statements prematurely. In this case, we're using it to exit the switch statement prematurely, because if we didn't put a break here, it's going to check all the other cases as well, but we only need to see if it's equal to 1. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's that. What's the next case? The next case is going to be A, right? So I'm going to say case A. Now, if it is A, I'm actually going to have this exact same 2 lines of code again, but this time instead of changing it to 1, I'm going to change it to what? I'm going to change it to the @ symbol, right? So let's change this to the @ symbol. What's the next one? Lowercase m becomes uppercase M. Okay. So because I'm lazy, I'm just going to copy these 3 lines, put them here, change this to a lowercase m, and change this to an uppercase M. What's the next one? Uppercase B becomes 8. Uppercase B becomes 8. And then lastly, lowercase s becomes $. Yes, Jose Garcia, the first case does need to be I. Thanks for catching that. And then lowercase s changes to $. There. Now, we're not done yet. We did the conversions, but the last thing we need to do is append exclamation point to the end of our transformed password, right? So how do we do that? It's very easy, but I'm going to let you guys tell me. It's going to be password dot append, and then in open close parentheses, I need to put the string of the thing that I'm going to append to the password. In this case, it's going to be exclamation point.
It sounds similar to the pushback function. Is there a difference between two?
Pushback function. Can you remind me what the pushback function is?
It's like the string and then dot push underscore back, and then it seems like the exact same thing as append.
Well, the pushback function is a function of the vector library, and you use that to add new variables to the vector. We haven't learned vectors yet, but that's the only pushback function that I'm aware of.
I remember something in the book about there being one of those for strings. It just seemed like the same thing as append, so
No.
just reminded me of that.
No. And if we're talking about vectors here, pushback is completely different from append. I've never heard of another pushback function for a different library. But anyways, yeah, we're gonna say password dot append, and in double quotes, because this has to be a string, exclamation point. Okay. And then what? Lastly, we have to see out the new password. Okay. So see out password end line. I think we're done. So I'm pretty confident that this will work. What do you guys think? Say something in the chat if you think this will work. You think it'll work? Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's see if it works. Okay, let's see what we got. What we did wrong here. So I is less than password. That's
Oh, you have to put the characters in apostrophes because they're characters. Wait, you did. Oh yeah, for the case, yeah.
You are absolutely right. Thank you. You see, when I was looking at the example, I was just going off on this, but I realized that the cases here were ints, and you don't put, yeah, because these are characters, we have to put single quotes around them. You are absolutely right. Thank you. Maybe now it'll work. Yep, it works. So,
What's up with that message that's at the top there?
oh, this is just a warning. It's not an error. So in this warning, so warnings don't typically, it's just telling you that it'll still work, but it might not work the way that you intended. So this warning says comparison of integer expressions of different signness. Okay, so this warning is,
Well, the size is always going to be 0 or greater, right?
yeah.
Well, if it's an empty string, is the size going to be 0 or is it going to be NPOS?
If the string was 0, then the size is going to be 0. Oh, if the string was empty, the size will be 0. Yeah. So it's just saying that this is just a warning, because this is saying that this value is going to be -0 or might be -0 or positive, but this value can only be 0 or positive. But that's not going to stop you from running the program. Okay, so
Cool.
Valerie Mora says that yours isn't working. That's fine. We can look at that in a moment. But before we help you out, go ahead and take a screenshot or do whatever you need to get this code, because this is going to be due next Thursday, right? Did everybody get it? Okay, so now we can help Miss Valerie Mora. I'm going to stop my share and allow you to share your screen, and then we can figure out what's wrong. Okay. Now, go ahead and maximize that window so we can see all the code. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, it's kind of loud,
Okay.
the background noise.
That's fine.
So I didn't want to, yeah.
That's okay. Just talk to us in the chat then. Yeah. Go ahead and scroll up. Oh, I see what's wrong. On line 11, you said int I -0. It should be int I equals 0. Was that the only thing that was wrong? Try running it again. Okay. It seems to me like the error is also on line 11. Go back.
There's no semicolon after password.size.
Yeah, you're gonna need to put a semicolon between. There you go. Because there needs to be 3 things. Try running it again. Let's see. Okay. What now? It says.
You have a semicolon after your for statement.
Yeah, you do. So on line 11,
At the end of the line.
yeah. Go ahead and yeah. And I think that's it. There you go. Yeah, so if that's it, I think we're done for today, unless anybody has any questions or anyone needs to see the code again. Are we good? Okay. Well, if nobody else has any other questions, I can go ahead and end this meeting because I know you guys are all dealing with midterms right now, right? All right. I expect this recording to be put up later in the evening. Thanks for coming. I'll go ahead and end the meeting now. Bye.